Hey everyone, and welcome to the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. I am Joe Cannon, and this is episode number 15. The main topic for this week is going to be how to live to 100 years old, or maybe longer. I've got 5 things that I think you should be doing or thinking about doing, and maybe not doing in some instances, to increase your odds of living into the triple digits. Before we get into that, let me cover the myth of the week. And this one is pretty prevalent in fitness centers around the world. It is the idea that when you're working out, you should pick whether or not you should do strength first or aerobic exercise, cardio first. And sometimes when I listen to people in the gym, when they ask the personal trainers this questions, usually the personal trainer will say you should be lifting weights first and then doing aerobic exercise, cardiovascular exercise, if you prefer to call it that, afterwards. The rationale usually for doing strength training first is that strength training is anaerobic. In other words, it burns carbohydrates, sugars. And the idea is if you first do strength training, you will burn off all the sugar in your muscles, and this in turn will make it easier for people to burn fat when they're on the elliptical or the treadmill. Well, there really isn't any good evidence that this is actually true. And it actually makes a little sense that it doesn't make sense, because when you consider how much sugar, carbohydrates are in the muscles, this storage form of sugar in the muscles is called glycogen. When you consider that in your body right now, you have about 1,800 to 2,000 calories of glycogen, carbohydrates, inside your muscles right now. You're not going to burn off 1,800 or 2,000 calories when you're doing strength training, especially not the way it's done in most fitness centers. Average exercise session in a fitness center is going to be anywhere from 30 minutes to about an hour. If you're lucky, you're burning off 500 calories. You're not even coming anywhere close to burning off 1,800 to 2,000 calories. And so that in and of itself means you don't have to worry about this. Also, the other reason why you shouldn't worry about burning off your glycogen first is that if you really did burn off all your glycogen first, you really wouldn't be able to burn a lot of fat anyway, because your muscles like to use glycogen, carbohydrates, during exercise. And you actually need those carbs to help you burn fat. So again, it doesn't make any difference what you do first, strength first or cardio first, especially if you're just starting an exercise program. If you are starting from square one, or you've been exercising for less than a year, for instance, then it really isn't going to matter what you're doing first. Strength first, cardio first. I've met bodybuilders who do cardio first and then strength. So it really doesn't matter for the most part what you do first. If your main goal, say down the road when you've progressed, after say several months of exercise, if your main goal is to say get stronger, well then maybe we could make an argument for doing strength training first. Or if your goal was to become more aerobically fit, then maybe you can make an argument for doing the aerobic aspect of exercise first. But again, for the average person, listen to me right now, it doesn't matter what you do first, strength first or cardio first. And I think this is an important message to get out to people, because you got a lot of these gurus out there who make it seem like they've got some secret answer to everybody's exercise problems. And they'll tell you you've got to exercise in the morning, and you got to exercise on an empty stomach, and you can only exercise on Tuesdays, and I'm making that one up. And you got to do strength first or cardio first. Here's the issue. The more rules these gurus make, the less likely people are going to do them. And the reason I say that is this, the average person out there right now in America, if you're in America or other first world nations, most people are only exercising at most 20 minutes a day, if Americans are any indication of that. And again, that's not even close to what is recommended, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So again, if you make up these roadblocks, you make it harder for people to exercise. Take the roadblocks out of the way and just tell people anything you do is going to help you. It doesn't matter what you do first, strength first, cardio first. Doesn't matter if you're gardening, take a walk around the block. Anything you're going to do is going to help improve your fitness levels. And that's really what it's about, improving fitness levels. So again, let's leave the guru rules out of the way. They don't make a lot of sense. A lot of them are just marketing tactics anyway. anyway because they're all trying to sell a book or, they're get on their little program or something like that. And most of them don't know what they're talking about. Trust me, I do know this. And so again, when in doubt, the simple answer is the correct answer. The simple answer is it doesn't matter what most people do first. Just do something. All right, so much for the myth of the week. What I want to talk about for the remainder of our time this week is steps that we can take to hopefully live to 100 years old, if not longer than 100 years old. What I'm going to talk about today is born out of a conversation I recently had with someone. If you remember a couple episodes ago, I told you about how a member of my family had passed away. He was a World War II and Korea veteran. He was 92. And as I'm recording this, I'm basically just returning from the memorial service for him. It was very, very moving. Again, he was an amazing person, and a testament to how amazing he was is that some of his former military friends actually came to his memorial service at my brother's church. And one of these individuals actually came from Texas. So he drove about 1,500 miles with his wife to be at this memorial service. And while we were out to lunch one day, he asked me, and this man was in his 80s, he asked me, what can I do to live to 100, live a long life? He was already in his 80s, so we talked about it for a little bit. And as I was driving home in the pouring rain a few days later, I said, it was a great conversation we had. And I think that, this is definitely worthy of a podcast episode because, again, like with the myth of the week, there's a whole bunch of these rules out there. Got to do this, got to do that. People write books, and again, books are great and all that, but I think that sometimes the gurus out there make things a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So what I want to do is I want to give you 5 things that you can do, as well as maybe not do in one instance, that will enhance the chances of our living to 100 years old, if not beyond that. So again, there's probably more out there, but I've kind of boiled them down into 5 big issues that I think will increase the chances of living a very long and hopefully productive life. So here we go with number 1 on my list. And this is actually one of the most important ones out there. And that is, it goes hand in hand with the myth of the week, and that's exercise. Gotta move. Again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the average American is only exercising about 20 minutes a day. That is not even the minimum that is required. The minimum requirement for exercise per day, according to the Centers of Disease Control, is 30 minutes a day. Again, most Americans not even getting that. And I want to point out that you don't need to go to the gym to do this. Movement of any form for at least 30 minutes is the minimum requirement for aerobic exercise. You can take a walk, you can get on the bike and ride the bike. I like biking to the gym, to be honest with you. So again, get on a bike, an elliptical. If you got a bike in your house, that counts. Walk up and down the steps, whatever you got to do. If you can accumulate at least 30 minutes most days of the week, you're doing a good job. And the other thing I want to point out here is it does not have to be at the same time. You don't have to rack up 30 minutes at one time. Exercise, it actually accrues interest. So you could, for instance, do 10-minute walk in the morning, 10-minute walk at lunch, and 10-minute walk after dinner at night. You just did your 30 minutes. Can you do more than that? Absolutely. Actually, the guidelines for Americans for aerobic activity is between 150 and 300 minutes a week of moderate exercise. Okay, 150 to 300 minutes a week. What the heck does moderate mean? You've heard that on the news a lot. What's moderate exercise? Moderate exercise is this. When you're exercising, I can hear you breathing, but you can still carry on a conversation with me. So if you're still able to talk while you're exercising, that is moderate exercise. And that's what I would say is if you're working out with a partner, Have a conversation while you're walking or riding a bike, whatever. As long as you can talk, that's moderate exercise. And that's what is normally recommended for most people. Now, if you're more fit, if you have greater abilities aerobically wise, well, the CDC recommends between 75 and 150 minutes of vigorous exercise. So again, vigorous is going to be more challenging than moderate exercise. Here with vigorous, you're not going to be able to carry on a conversation, because it's more higher intensity. And again, why is the dosage, the amount less, say 175 to 150? Well, because it's more intense. Because it's more intense, you don't have to do as much of it. That doesn't mean you start out with the intense stuff. Again, if you're starting out with all this, don't aim for 300 minutes of moderate, and definitely don't aim for 75 or 150 of intense exercise. Do what you can do. Moderate exercise is great. Not a darn thing wrong with it. That's what you could do. Great. Start with 10 minutes a day, and slowly 10 minutes will build up to 11, 12, 13, 14. You get the idea. So that's the recommendation for aerobic exercise. In terms of resistance training, strength training, okay? There's really no official guidelines out there on what you should do. There's a whole bunch of different little exercise programs out there you can pick from. I personally think circuit training is a great way to go, where you just do one exercise per body part for all the major muscles of your body. That's it. And according to the CDC, just do some strength training 2 to 3 days a week and you're good to go. You don't have to do strength training 5 days a week. 2 to 3 days is all most people need. Now, obviously, if you're an athlete and all that, you can do more, but for the average person, not necessarily to do more than 2 to 3 days a week. So why am I so gung-ho on exercise? Well, as I like to say, exercise, movement is medicine. Exercise is a medication, as I like to say as well. It has lots and lots of benefits. And I'm shocked that there's no TV commercials out there on the benefits of exercise. If there was a drug that did everything exercise did, you'd see that drug on television. Why it doesn't appear for exercise is beyond me. Probably because you can't make a lot of money selling exercise, because you just take a walk and you're getting exercise, right? But again, some of the benefits of exercise, I just jotted a few down before I recorded this. Exercise, movement in general, will reduce your risk of heart disease, cancer, and stroke. Heart disease is the number one killer of everybody. Okay? It's the number one killer of everybody. Cancer is the number two. Cancer is the second leading cause of death in America and other first world nations. Stroke is the fourth leading cause. So the first, second, and fourth leading cause out there of kicking the bucket, exercise simultaneously reduces the risk of those three right there, gets better. Diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, which is the most prevalent kind out there. Diabetes, your risk of getting type 2 diabetes goes down the more you move. And when combined with eating a better diet, I've even seen diabetes get reversed. Yeah, I use the R word, reversed. I even know somebody in a wheelchair who got off of his diabetes medication when he combined exercise with eating less food. He lost weight and he didn't need the medications anymore. And again, he no longer was considered a diabetic. Want more proof that exercise is really good for us? Exercise reduces the risk of dementia. And that includes Alzheimer's disease, by the way. Always remember the rule of thumb. There is an intimate relationship between the brain health and the heart health. What is good for the heart is good for the brain. So as we move more, we keep our heart strong. This in turn helps keep our brain strong as well. So again, you got a reduction in heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's. You can make your bones stronger. So you not only reduce your risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia, that's pre-osteoporosis. But if you do exercise the right way and you give it time, I've even seen bones get stronger to the point where people no longer were considered to have osteoporosis. Yeah, I'm talking cure osteoporosis. It takes time. You have to know what you're doing, but I have seen it happen in people over the years. So again, that's just some of the stuff that exercise does. I'm not done yet. I got more for you. Exercise has been shown to alter genetic expression, alter your genes. If you switch back to episode number 12, I talked in depth about this topic. This is called epigenetic changes, how the genome, the DNA of our cells can be altered by different ways. And one of the things that can alter the expression of genes is physical activity. So exercise, another way exercise can help us live longer by switching off bad genes, switching on good genes. Exercise, another thing that it does is it is one of the most powerful things that'll help lower our resting heart rate. That's the heart rate, the number of times your heart is beating when you're sitting there quietly and not moving. It's called the resting heart rate. Generally exercise because it makes your heart stronger. It basically means that when you're not exercising, your heart doesn't have to work as hard, and so it slows down. Well, there is evidence that suggests that people who have slower resting heart rates actually live longer than those who have higher resting heart rates. One study pointed out that, one of the optimal ranges for lower resting heart rate in terms of longevity was about 65 beats a minute. So if your resting heart rate is in the 65 beats a minute range, you're doing pretty good. If it's in the 80 or 90 beats a minute range, then that's not so good. Why is that? Well, the theory goes is that all those extra heartbeats puts more stress on the blood vessels of our body. And when you take that out over decades, that may lead to more blood vessel damage, which in turn leads to more heart disease and strokes and stuff like that. That's the theory. But regardless of what the theorists say, generally we see longer lifespans in people who have lower resting heart rates. And what's a great way to lower your resting heart rate? Exercise, movement. The more you move, stronger your heart is, less times it has to beat when you're not doing nothing. I mentioned previously in a previous podcast that exercise will increase the size of your mitochondria. Mitochondria are little batteries inside of your cells. They burn fat. You not only make bigger mitochondria, but you make more mitochondria. And again, the more efficient your mitochondria can work, well, the more energy you're going to have and the healthier you tend to be. Beyond that, exercise makes your blood vessels healthier. Okay, you've got about 100,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. Exercise, it makes them healthier. As a rule, sometimes as we get older, our blood vessels tend to stiffen up, which in turn can lead to an increase in blood pressure. But exercise makes our blood vessels more rubbery, so they're less hardened. Remember, hardening of the arteries. And so blood vessels that are healthier, they tend to be more rubbery. And again, that's another reason why our blood pressure tends to stay a little healthier as we get older. Another way that exercise works makes our insulin work better. Again, we mentioned a little bit ago about how exercise can improve people with diabetes and in some cases even reverse diabetes. Well, going along the same lines as that is, remember, insulin is the hormone that puts sugar in the cells of our body. Well, people who have diabetes, they may make insulin, but it doesn't work very well anymore. Turns out, exercise makes insulin work better. And so that's one of the reasons why exercise can improve people's health who have diabetes. A lot of health problems are linked to an increase in cellular inflammation. Well, turns out exercise lowers the inflammation in the body. And as you lower the inflammation, you lower the risk of, again, we're looking at heart disease, diabetes, cancer, strokes, etc. So again, underlying a lot of conditions is an increase in cellular inflammation. As exercise lowers inflammation, that's another mechanism by which it might reduce the risk of disease. Now, we have a lot of people out there who are probably taking probiotic supplements to improve their microbiome. Guess what? Exercise also improves the microbiome. Clinical studies have documented a change in the gut microbiome, the bacteria in our colon when people exercise. So again, if you want to take your probiotic supplements, that's great. Just realize that if you're exercising regularly, this is also fostering healthy changes in your microbiome. And then another thing that exercise does is that it can help you maintain your muscle mass as you get older. Again, we're talking about living to 100 years old. Now, if we're going to live to 100 years old, we got to be strong enough to do it. And I need you to realize that there is a phenomenon out there that people tend to get as they get older, and it's called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia. Sarcopenia refers to muscle loss as we get older. And the thing with sarcopenia is that while it affects all the muscle fibers in our body as we tend to get older, the muscle fibers it tends to just decimate the most, knock out the most, are the muscle fibers that are called fast twitch. Fast twitch muscle fibers, they respond very quickly, okay? And they're very strong and powerful. As we get older, we tend to lose some of these fast twitch powerful muscle fibers. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means as we get older, we tend to slow down. We may not be as strong. And taken to extremes, it means one day you fall and maybe you can't get up. Or maybe you can't get off a toilet, or maybe you can't get out of a chair. That's a problem because once you can no longer take care of yourself, well, you can't do your activities of daily living anymore. That's a medical term. It means you can't take care of yourself, and that's a problem. So exercise, by helping us maintain our muscle mass as we get older, allows us to basically stay in our homes longer. And also take care of ourselves, and this can improve the quality of life and even the length of life as well, because a stronger person is less likely to fall. Falls, again, unfortunately, they don't always don't just result in a broken hip. They could also result in the demise of people as well. So a strong person is less likely to fall, and someone who's less likely to fall should live longer. So again, exercise, powerful medicine, very, very powerful medicine that I think is underutilized in America. Now, you might actually be thinking to yourself, well, Joe, that's really great, and it sounds like exercise is going to improve the quality of our life, but you're talking about living longer. Does exercise actually help us live longer? Yes, it does. So a study came out in 2011. This investigation does not get the attention it deserves. It was published in a prestigious medical journal called The Lancet, and the title of the study was Minimum Amount of Physical Activity for Reduced Mortality and Extended Life Expectancy, a prospective cohort study. This investigation involved over 400,000 people who were followed for 12 years. And they basically broke the people up into different groups: the people who didn't exercise at all, the people who walked on a regular basis, the people who jogged on a regular basis, and the people who literally ran on a regular basis. And they noted after 12 years of following these people that when they compared the exercisers to those who didn't do anything, those people who walked just 15 minutes a day, they had not only a 14% reduced risk of dying from everything. Think about that. 14% reduced risk of dying from heart disease, cancer, diabetes, strokes, you name it. They not only had a 14% risk of death from everything, but they lived 3 years longer than those who did not exercise at all. Think about this. 15 minutes of walking a day. We're looking at, about an hour and a half walking a day a week. That's an average about 92 minutes a week. That's actually less than the CDC guidelines, by the way, which is, 150 minutes of exercise per week. These people, they walked about on average 92 minutes a week, 15 minutes a day. They lived 3 years longer on average. Think about that. How much would you pay for a drug that gave you an extra 3 years of life on Earth? The beauty of this is that exercise is free. All you got to do is walk more. I'm amazed that this finding is not on billboards, not on TV commercials. Again, it boggles my mind that nobody is talking about this. You have within your grasp a drug that will extend the human lifespan significantly. I remember, there was a drug for cancer that was advertised on TV in America a while ago, and they would advertise it during prime time, and they made it seem like this drug was the greatest thing in the world. It was actually a cancer medication. When you actually looked at the small print on the TV commercials, the average increase in life expectancy from this drug was only 3 months. That was it, 3 months. And they were making it seem like it was the greatest thing in the universe. exercise can increase lifespan by 3 years? There is no drug that'll do that. I'm sorry. Again, that's the beauty of exercise. Look at what it'll do. So again, if we're looking to live a long life and hopefully hit those triple digits, exercise is definitely something we should be taking into consideration and consider doing. Now, there's a test out there that I like to talk about sometimes. It's an exercise test that you can actually do at home. And again, it's one of those things where I don't think people are aware of it. It's called the 30-second chair stand test. The 30-second chair stand test. Basically, the 30-second chair stand test is a test of functional lower body strength. And so basically all you're going to do is this. You're going to take a chair, you're going to put it against the wall because we don't want the chair to move. You're going to sit in a chair, you're going to cross your arms in front of your chest because we want to take your arms out of the equation. And all you're going to do is try to stand up from the chair and sit back down as many times as you can do it within 30 seconds. And you count them up, and you can compare these to people of different ages and genders. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to link to the video from the CDC. It's on YouTube, so you can see exactly how to do this. You can go on YouTube and just type in 30 second chair stand test, and you can see it yourself. But in case you can't find it, I am going to link it in the episode notes. But here's the thing, if you can't do as many of these repetitions for your age group and your gender, well then that associated with greater lower body muscle weakness and an increased risk of falls. Remember, people who fall often break legs, break hips, and sometimes they don't make it out of the hospital. So the 30-second chair stand test can be a nice, quick way to ascertain your lower body strength and maybe your risk of falls. Again, it's something that I don't see done a lot in fitness centers. It's a test that's easy to do. You can do it in your house. Again, I think it's always best to, especially for anybody with low functional ability, to have somebody there with you to do it with you. But again, watch the video. There's several videos on YouTube of this. Again, I'm going to link to the video that goes to the Center for Disease Control because I think that's one of the better ones out there. It's pretty easy. So again, 30-second chair stand test give you an idea of how strong your lower body might be. And so I think that's a great, easy test to do. So exercise, fantastic. As important as exercise is, I want you to know it ranks right up there with the second thing that we should be doing if we want to reach 100, and that's eat more colorful foods. When I say eat more colorful foods, I mean more fruits, more veggies, more beans, more seeds, and tea. Tea counts too. So again, I don't think people eat enough of these types of foods, and I think that's a problem. It may come back and bite us in the butt one day. Just like with exercise, evidence suggests that the regular consumption of colorful foods reduces the risk of dying from everything. And it doesn't take a lot either. One study I noted that, again, I'll put in the episode notes, noted that an increase in life expectancy was seen at only eating 5 servings of fruits and veggies a day. That's not a lot. Okay, so these things pack a lot of punch, and you don't have to eat a lot of them, although the more, the better, I would say. Now, why is it that these foods seem to play a role in reducing the risk of various diseases? Well, there's a number of reasons, but I think one of the most important ones is that fruits and veggies and beans and seeds and teas, they contain compounds which we often call phytonutrients. They're also called phytochemicals. The prefix phyto means plant, so these are plant nutrients. And the last time I checked, there was over 4,000 of these plant nutrients that were known to exist. Now, there's a whole bunch of these. I want to just briefly mention 4 of the main categories of these phytonutrients. They are the carotenoids, the flavonoids. There's another category called ellagic acid, and a 4th category, which is called allium. So what are these things? Well, again, carotenoids. You've heard of beta carotene. Okay, so beta carotene is one of the carotenoids. So where do you find it? Well, sure, carrots, but also broccoli, tomatoes, sweet potatoes. They all have these carotenoid molecules. Flavonoids. So flavonoids, you've probably heard of these. They're actually, some of them are actually sold as dietary supplements. More about that in a second. Resveratrol is a flavonoid. Quercetin is a flavonoid. So again, you're finding these things in a variety of different foods. Again, blueberries, strawberries, green tea, black tea, apples, they also have flavonoids. Ellagic acid is found again in blueberries and strawberries. Again, so as you get the idea, it's not just one food that has these compounds. Food is a combination of all of them. Okay, and then allium is again found in onions and garlic. All right, so when I make my my chili that I like to make in my crock pot, I usually throw garlic in there, and again and onions as well. I like red onions. So again, you're getting those sulfur compounds. Allium is a sulfur-containing compound, which in turn helps you make other compounds in your body, like, say, glutathione, which is a powerful antioxidant that we actually make in our body and need sulfur to do it. So again, these plant compounds, they act as, in the body, they act as antioxidants. And one of the ways in which I like to talk about these plant chemicals is, I purposely called this, point number 2, eat more colorful foods, because I didn't want to call attention to any one of them, because I don't think there's any one superfood. I think they're all super. Superfood is a kind of an invented term for marketing purposes, but all food is superfood, okay? But when you look at the food and you see the colors, the blues, the greens, the oranges, the colors are the antioxidants. And that's a message that I don't think people realize. Those colors usually are because of the antioxidants in the foods. And when we eat the foods, we get the antioxidants. And just as the antioxidants protected the foods from environmental toxins, etc., when we eat the foods, they in turn help protect us as well. But in addition to the antioxidant effects of these carotenoids and flavonoids, etc., like exercise, they can reduce cellular inflammation, which in turn helps inhibit the growth of cancer cells, inhibits our risk of getting heart disease as well. And then we also have evidence that these foods can also alter the microbiome. And I'm bringing it up because, again, microbiome is very popular these days and people take probiotic supplements. Again, I'm a big fan that the simple answer is often the correct answer. And you can do a probiotic supplement if you like, but just realize that you're exercising, you're improving your microbiome. You're eating more colorful foods, you're improving your microbiome as well. So it's not just supplements that will do this. Again, you have within your grasp the ability to alter microbiome yourself. Now, how does the microbiome help us? Well, for instance, the microbiome work in synergy with us. It's a symbiotic relationship. So what they do is they eat the food that we eat, and they then give off compounds that we in turn use to stay healthy. For instance, we know that the microbiome produce chemicals which can inhibit the formation of colon cancer, for instance. So there's probably a whole bunch of other ways the microbiome helps us stay healthy. Again, we're only starting to understand the microbiome now. I just want to throw that out to you. There definitely is a link between the microbiome content and colon cancer, and probably heart disease risk as well, linked to the microbiome. So again, even though we like to talk about the colorful foods acting as antioxidants, I want you to realize there's a lot more going on than simply neutralizing free radicals because of antioxidants. There's a lot more stuff going on there. Now, food versus supplements. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that when we talked about the carotenoids, I said, well, you probably heard about beta carotene. Beta carotene is one of the carotenoid molecules. It's actually sold as a dietary supplement. So can you just take the supplement? I'm going to say no. As a matter of fact, I don't think anybody should be taking beta-carotene supplements. And as a rule, I'm not a big fan of individual nutrients. I think food provides a more broader spectrum of nutrients than any individual ingredient. And another reason why I'm cautious of advocating for one ingredient, like for instance, beta-carotene. Well, let's talk about beta-carotene because in the annals of dietary supplements, beta-carotene has a reputation that most probably are not aware of. And here it is. I'm old enough to remember that in the 1980s and even 70s, Beta-carotene was at one time called the secret power of fruits and vegetables. In other words, people said, why is it that when people eat more fruits and veggies, they get less cancer and heart disease? Well, everybody likes to boil things down to a common denominator, and so they said it gotta be about the beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is found in fruits and vegetables. That's gotta be the secret sauce. Well, in the 1990s, researchers tested this. They randomly gave beta-carotene supplements and also vitamin E. They wanted to check out vitamin E as well because it also had a reputation. They randomly gave beta-carotene supplements to hundreds of thousands of people. Let's see if beta-carotene reduced cancer or reduced heart disease risk. It failed on both fronts. It didn't reduce cancer. It didn't reduce heart disease. But what happened kind of stunned everybody. In people who smoked, used to smoke, or worked around asbestos, beta-carotene increased the chances of lung cancer. I'm going to say that again. If you smoked, used to smoke, or worked around asbestos, beta-carotene supplements increased the chances of lung cancer. How much? Anywhere from 18 to 28% increased chance of lung cancer from these supplements. What the heck's going on here? Remember, there are over 4,000 phytochemicals out there. Beta-carotene is just one of them. When you eat a carrot, you're not just getting beta-carotene, you're getting alpha-carotene, beta, gamma, delta-carotene, epsilon-carotene, all the carotenes. That's right. When you see beta in front of some kind of a supplement, etc., realize that they named them in the order they discovered them. Alpha-carotene came first, and beta-carotene, yada, yada, yada. So again, it's not about just one nutrient. You're not going to get lung cancer from eating a carrot, but taking a beta-carotene supplement, it's possible. So now you know the reason why food is going to be better than individual phytonutrients. Again, they're not all going to individually be as infamous as, say, beta-carotene, but, food is it's less expensive and you're getting a more broader spectrum of nutrients. You're getting all those thousands of phytochemicals, not just one. So since we're talking about living longer and food, let's talk about the elephant in the room for a moment. What happens if you eat less food? Turns out that research appears to show that when you give fewer calories to laboratory animals, how much? About 25 to 30% less calories per day, they tend to live longer and they tend to be healthier. Their lifespan improves and their health span improves. And this has been seen in pretty much everything that's ever been tested. Rats, mice, worms, bumblebees, you name it. One of the examples of the power of eating less calories I saw was in an article from Scientific American a few years ago. These researchers, they recounted the story of a monkey who was put on a special diet at the age of 16, which is middle age in monkey years. They gave the monkey 30% fewer calories per day starting at age 16. The monkey is now over 43, 44 years of age, which is pretty old for monkey years. But in terms of humans, that's the equivalent of about a 130-year-old person. So what they're saying here is you give the monkey fewer calories, even in middle age, it seems to extend the lifespan. Now, I'm not saying that if you start eating 30% fewer calories, you're going to reach to 130. Nobody's ever reached that age, to my knowledge, as of yet. But again, it does go to the power of eating fewer calories. Again, we're not talking a lot. We're talking anywhere from 25 to maybe 30% fewer than normal. Again, what you're hearing now is some of the hype around what's called intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is where you eat normally 1 day or 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and then a couple days a week you eat, say, maybe nothing hardly, or just a few calories per day. So intermittently you cut back on your calories. The idea here is if it works in the monkeys and the worms and the bumblebees and the mice, it might work in us. Well, the problem, however, is that we don't know if eating fewer calories extends the human lifespan in humans because we live so long. it would be a very difficult experiment to do. You'd have to obviously take a large group of people and basically put them in a bubble for their entire life and feed them a certain amount of calories. That's never going to happen. So the writing on the wall is that in other species, giving them fewer calories leads to a longer lifespan and even a healthier, longer lifespan. The idea is it would work in us too. It may not. I can't say for sure at this point. What I would say is, if you want to do intermittent fasting, that's great. I wouldn't take it to extremes. I do see some people out there, not eating for like 30 and 40 hours. I wouldn't do that at all. I think that's way, way too long. Again, if we're talking cutting back calories, it's not a lot, like 25, 30% at most. Now, I am going to do an episode on intermittent fasting. I'm actually reading the research now. I want to make sure I dot all my I's and cross all my T's. So stay tuned. We are going to talk more in the future about intermittent fasting. But again, I throw it out to you because there is some interesting research. If you wanted to do some intermittent fasting, again, the writing on the wall says it might help. But again, human research is still lacking. But again, stay tuned. We'll talk more in depth about it in the future. Okay, so much for eating fruits and veggies and colorful foods and all that jazz. That's going to take us to the third thing we should be considering if we want to live to, say, triple digits, and that is you really should know what your blood pressure is. Blood pressure is one of those things where I don't think we take it serious. We don't feel it. But what is blood pressure? Blood pressure is the pressure of your blood as it's coursing through your blood vessel system, as it's going through your 100,000 miles of blood vessels. That blood exerts a pressure force against the inner lining walls of your blood vessels. And we can measure this with a blood pressure cuff. And I'm sure if you've ever been to the doctor, you've done it. They've done it for you. And you may even have a blood pressure cuff at home. The thing with blood pressure is if the blood pressure goes too high, well, too great of a stress on those blood vessel walls will damage the integrity of the walls of the blood vessels. And if you break down the structural integrity of the blood vessel walls, this in turn can lead to plaque formation, as well as heart disease and even stroke. As a matter of fact, high blood pressure is the number one cause of strokes. And as I said at the top of this episode, stroke is the fourth leading cause of death out there. So if we can maintain a healthy blood pressure as we get older, well, then we can lower our risk of getting a very serious health problem, which could lead to very bad things happening to us. So how can we keep our blood pressure under control? Well, we've already talked about one great way to do this, and that's exercise. But again, we've also talked about another great way which is eat foods that are low in sodium. We want to eat low sodium foods and eat more foods that are high in another mineral called potassium. Potassium. As sodium tends to raise blood pressure, potassium tends to lower blood pressure. So what foods have a lot of sodium? We'll hit the sodium first. Well, rule of thumb, I can make a blanket statement and say this. If the food comes in a can or a box or it's got a wrapper around it, it's going to have a lot of sodium. If it comes in a can, a box, or it's got a wrapper, it's going to have sodium. What foods tend to have low sodium and a lot of potassium? We've already talked about them. Fruits and veggies and beans and seeds. So again, we go back to those colorful foods. They have more potassium, more phytonutrients. They are also very, very low in sodium. Okay, so if we're at the supermarket, for instance, again, you've probably heard this before from others, but when you go shopping at the supermarket, just shop the perimeter of the supermarket. The perimeter, the outside of the supermarket, is where you're going to find the fruits and the veggies and all that stuff. It's in the aisles of the supermarket. That's where you tend to find the things that tend to have more sodium. Now, I understand you can't just shop the outside perimeter of the supermarket. You got to go in those aisles. I get that. We all do. So if you are venturing into the aisles, how do you know if the food has got a lot of sodium or not? Well, if you're going to be looking at food labels, okay, now which I think everybody should be looking at food labels, realize that pretty much every food out there in America is going to have something called the nutrition facts label. It's literally called nutrition facts label. So when you are looking for sodium, okay, on the nutrition facts label, you're gonna see the nutrition facts label, and when you look at that, you're gonna see a bunch of percentages going down the right-hand side. The percentages that you see are called the daily values. The daily values, and with the daily values, what they do is they tell you the amount of that nutrient that you're allowed to have per day. So it may say something like the daily value next to sodium may be 10%. It's giving you 10% of the amount of sodium you're allowed to have per day. If you see 20%, it'll give you 20% of the amount of sodium you're allowed to have per day. And the same thing is true for everything. You'll see, a percent next to potassium. You'll see a percent next to, saturated fat, etc. So what does all this mean? When you're looking at these nutrition facts labels and you look at the percentage, remember two things. That's all you got to remember is two things. When you see 5% or less, it means it's low in that nutrient. 5% or less means it's low. And when you see 20% or more, it means it's high in that nutrient. So ideally, you want to see a number less than 20 next to sodium. You'd also want to see a number less than 20 next to total fat, next to saturated fat. Ideally, you'd want to see a higher number next to potassium. And they are listing potassium on food labels. Again, you just go to look at the bottom and you'll see potassium is actually listed. So again, 5% means it's low, 20% or more means it's high. You now have the power to analyze any nutrition facts label in America right now. So again, focusing on more fruits, more veggies, more beans, more seeds, more teas, that's great. If you are going to be buying things that comes in can or boxes and stuff like that, again, just look at those nutrition facts labels, look at the percents, and when you see 5% or less, it means it's low. 20% or more means it's high in that nutrient. That's all you got to do. Again, maintaining blood pressure is fantastic way to reduce the risk of stroke, keep your blood vessels nice and healthy, which in turn can help increase the risk of the chances of living a very long life. Along the same lines of that would be, if you have to, lose a little bit of weight. Not a lot either. Studies have noted a drop in blood pressure when people lose only 5% of their body weight. That's it, 5%. So if, for instance, if you're 200 pounds, losing 10 pounds, that's 5%. That would actually reduce blood pressure in many individuals. And again, another thing I mentioned a little while ago is, again, it goes right back to the number one thing we talked about, and that's exercise. Exercise is usually very effective at reducing blood pressure. I actually saw this personally myself and a buddy of mine a while back. He called me and he says, Joe, my blood pressure is really high. Normally blood pressure, let's say, is normal is like 120 over 80. His blood pressure was like, it was like 190 over 90 or something crazy like that. It was very high. So I said, listen, he was at his desk like most self-employed people is. He's at his desk working most of the day. And I said, go take a walk around the block, come back, sit down, take your blood pressure again. 20 minutes later, he comes back, he sits down, he calls me on the phone. His blood pressure was 120 over 80. So simply taking a 20-minute walk took him from high blood pressure down to normal blood pressure. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to run a marathon to reap the benefits of exercise. Just a simple little walk around the block many times can do the trick. So again, blood pressure, very, very important. If you want to know more about blood pressure, skip back to episode number 5. Number 5, that's where I covered a whole bunch of ways to lower your blood pressure naturally. I would suggest you check out episode number 5. It's actually quite interesting. You may be surprised at some of the things I discovered that can help lower blood pressure. Some of these things, and I'm not just talking fruits and veggies, some of these things may actually surprise you. So skip back to episode number 5. Again, blood pressure, we should be knowing what that is and taking steps to maintain a healthy blood pressure as we get older. Now, if you noticed, as we've been talking, these last 50 or so minutes. The first three things are things that we should be doing. Exercise, eat better, know your blood pressure. The next thing I want to talk about is something that we should not be doing, and that is we should not be smoking. In case you haven't got the memo, smoking ain't healthy. It just isn't. There is overwhelming evidence that smoking increases the risk of heart disease, cancer. When I'm talking cancer, I'm not just talking lung cancer. I'm talking lung cancer. I'm talking mouth cancer, tongue cancer, bladder cancer, stomach, you name it. It increases the risk of that cancer. How about this? Smoking increases the risk of osteoporosis, brittle bone disease. What the heck's up with that? Well, it turns out that there's compounds in tobacco that make bone-eating cells very hungry. These are called osteoclasts. And these bone-eating osteoclast cells, they get hungrier when people smoke. And this is why you tend to see more osteoporosis and pre-osteoporosis in people who smoke. And if that's not enough to get you to not smoke, it turns out that studies also appear to show an increase in wrinkles in people who smoke as well. Again, you're lighting up cigarettes and cigars and all that stuff. All those free radicals are hitting you in the face, and they're causing wrinkles. And this is something that's been documented in very many investigations over the years. As I was looking into this further, I went to a very interesting website, which I like a lot. It's called thetruth.com, thetruth.com. I'll link to it in the episode references so you can check it out. This is basically it's an anti-smoking advocacy website. Although they're taking on other topics as well these days. But what I like about them is they kind of present it just right there, so you don't have to hunt for the answers. And I just grabbed a few tidbits from their website that I thought were interesting, and I thought I'd share with you. According to thetruth.com, over 160,000 people die each year from smoking-related diseases. 160,000 people a year. I did the math. That comes to about 438 people a day dying from smoking-related diseases. Cigarette smoke has 11 different chemicals which are known to cause cancer in humans. Not suspected, they're known to cause cancer in humans. 90% of lung cancers in women are related to tobacco use. Secondhand smoke has over 7,000 chemicals, many of which are known to cause cancer. Oh, and if you have pets, they ain't getting off the hook either. If you have pets, studies have actually noted that cats are twice as likely to get cancer if you smoke. Why? Well, they inhale the secondhand smoke, but also all that smoke gets caught in their fur. And when they lick the fur, they ingest those chemicals. They get the double whammy. Again, smoking, I can't think of anything good coming from smoking cigarettes or cigars or pipes or anything like that. I mean, it's just, there's no benefits to it. I understand it's addicting. Look, I lost both of my parents to smoking-related cancers. My mom and my dad died less than 3 months apart from each other from lung cancer and throat cancer and lung cancer. So I know how hard it was to quit smoking. Again, my mom couldn't quit, even though she had cancer, couldn't quit. It's just awful. So I have seen firsthand what tobacco use can do in people. And, I wish these things would be wiped from the face of the earth. There, I said it. They have irrevocably changed the course of my life. My parents would probably still be alive today if they didn't smoke. So, I can only present the evidence. I know it's a difficult thing to hear, and it's also a very difficult habit to break. I do think that presenting the facts can help, hopefully, some people to kick this very, very, very bad habit. Oh, and while we're on the topic, I'm not convinced that vaping is safer. Here, if you jump back to episode number 14, I covered a whole lot of vaping research. I came away from that, noting that I don't believe it is any safer And again, if you've been watching the headlines and reading the news and watching the news, you know there's been some really crazy stuff happening with vaping. And regardless, vaping has not been shown to be any safer than smoking. And it doesn't even appear to stop people from smoking either. Interesting. Oh, and while we're on the topic, and it's something I didn't even bring up while I was doing the episode, they call it vaping, but it's not a vapor. It's a funny thing. It didn't even occur to me as I was doing that episode. They like to think they call it vaping, like you're vaping, water vapor. It's not water vapor. You're not exhaling water vapor. It's some kind of an aerosol, which contains a lot of chemicals. Some of them were cancer-causing chemicals. Again, I'll stop the vaping thing right here. Again, jump back to episode number 14, if you dare, to see the research that I uncovered on this stuff. Okay. But again, smoking, I don't see anything good coming of it. So that's the one thing I would say not to do if you're trying to live to 100 and beyond. Now that we get number 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the way, that brings us to the very last thing that I wanted to talk about. And I listed it last because I think it may be the hardest thing for us to do. And that is, if we can, try to reduce our stress and our negative feelings. Very difficult. All these days we're all under stress. We're always on the go. I get that. I'm in that same boat with you. But I got to tell you, the research is showing that lots and lots of daily, regular, negative stress is not healthy for us. Telomeres. Telomeres, you may have heard of these things. Telomeres are little bits of extra DNA, and they are found at the ends of our chromosomes. The easy analogy that everybody talks about, because it's a great analogy, is telomeres are like the little plastic caps on your shoelaces. And again, these little plastic caps on your shoelaces, what they do is they protect your shoelaces from becoming, all untangled and frayed. And that's what the telomeres do in us. So they protect our DNA from becoming unraveled and damaged. Now, I bring this up because generally longer telomeres mean longer life and healthier you might be. So longer telomeres, better health, better longevity. As we age, our telomeres tend to shorten. Turns out, chronic stress also tends to shorten our telomeres. So if you're under a lot of chronic stress, that may not be so good from a genetic potential by making your DNA, your chromosomes, more easily broken. Which again, since DNA controls everything, broken DNA, broken chromosomes could increase the risk of heart disease and cancer and stuff like that. Now, I want to make it clear what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about reducing chronic bad stress. All stress is not created equal, okay? Turns out exercise is a stress, right? It is. And it's actually a beneficial stress for the most part. So what I'm talking about is mild stress. Mild stress can actually be good, but it's that chronic bad stress that tends to not be so good for us. When you look at, say, people who are caregivers, for instance, they're caring for a sick relative or something like that for a long period of time. They tend to have shorter telomeres and they tend to get sicker. So again, I'm really talking about the chronic stress, which again is very detrimental. But again, mild stress, exercise, really good for us, actually can make our DNA stronger, again, promoting those epigenetic changes we talked about at the beginning of this episode. So when it comes to stress, okay, any kind of stress, realize that the body kind of goes through a syndrome. And this syndrome is called the general adaptation syndrome, It's usually abbreviated in the textbooks as GAS. The general adaptation syndrome describes how the body adapts to a stress. And there's 3 phases. All right. You've got the first phase is the alarm phase, where your body's like, what's going on? And your body, basically circles the wagons and tries to adapt to the stress as best as it can. And this eventually leads to what is called the resistance phase. The resistance phase is where you become resistant to the stress. You've adapted to it. You become stronger and you can deal with it. All right. And that's really where you want to stay in the resistance phase. The exhaustion phase is where the chronic stress actually starts to overwhelm us and break us down. And that's where things start going awry. Like, for instance, as telomeres shorten, we tend to, have an increase in our blood pressure, which in turn can lead to, again, heart disease and strokes and stuff like that. So the key is to have the stress, but not have it overwhelm us, and also perceive the stress as good. It turns out as if you perceive the stress as good, it's actually not as bad. It's that negative connotation when you're like, oh my goodness, I got to do this again. And again, over time, it wears us down. And that's really, what we want to try to address as best we can. Again, this is the hardest thing to do. It really is. And so I bring it out because I think it is something that we really should be thinking about, even though I realize how challenging and insurmountable it might be to deal with the negative stresses we have in our life. Again, we can't go through life without stress. As I said, a little bit of stress can be a good thing, like exercise. And again, little bits of stress can actually help, make us stronger, keep us in that resistance phase. This actually has a term to it. There's a phenomenon out there called hormesis. Hormesis, that's the word of the week, hormesis. Hormesis is a strange phenomenon that refers to toxic things used in small amounts tend to be beneficial. Sounds strange, but things that are detrimental to us in high doses, when you take a little bit of them, they actually tend to make us stronger and more resilient. And so this is a very strange phenomenon called hormesis. And I bring it out because, again, exercise, again, is a little bit of stress. It can help us stay stronger. Again, eating the right kind of foods. Again, they can help buttress our immune system. Again, our body looks at some of these things and what is that? And it can help our immune system stay stronger. So again, very, very challenging to do, but I think in the long run, it would be beneficial if we can modify our life as best we possibly can to remove some of these negative stresses. And again, not just the stress, but one way that we might actually help accommodate, our longevity is to, while you can't do away with the stress, we can alter maybe how we perceive the stress. And I can't talk about this without, bringing up my grandmother. So my grandmother was unique in that she lived to 104 years old. I actually say 104 and a half because technically it was 104 and a half that Grandma Cannon lived to. She was a unique, wonderful person, remembered the Titanic sinking. She was born in 1903. So she remembered the Titanic sinking. She voted in the first election women were allowed to vote in. So she had these phenomenal stories. And as I said, she lived to 104. And one of the things I'll just say right off the bat is, she didn't smoke. And if she drank, I probably only saw her drink a beer maybe a handful of times in my entire life and have fingers left over. So she really didn't drink. She never smoked. And she wasn't a vegetarian or a vegan. I had many great dinners at her house growing up. She made the best roast beef you can imagine. And it seemed like every night was roast beef night. So she was definitely not a vegan. So they were eating meat on a regular basis, but she still lived to 104. So how did that happen? Again, perhaps Granny Cannon has some really good genes. That's possible. But I also know that, she was active around the house. She climbed the steps of her house. Again, she had a house with a lot of steps, and so she did that, and so she was cleaning the house. But the other thing that I think is interesting about my grandmother is that she never dwelled on the negative. And I really hardly ever heard her say anything bad about anybody either. She only said good things about people. And she never harped on the bad things. And I think that's really important, especially for my grandmother, because as she got older, she had a very unique stress that most people don't go through. My grandmother outlived everybody. Think about this. At 104 years of age, my grandmother outlived her husband, her siblings. She outlived her friends. She outlived all three of her children. That is a very unique cross to bear. Think about going through life and you're just outliving everybody. She kept going. And that in and of itself is a stress, but when I would talk to her, you would not know this about her. She was happy. She was going to the hairdresser on a regular basis. I remember her dancing at her 100th birthday. So this was a lady who, again, really took and she had a lot of bad things happen to her over the year. I mean, my goodness, losing all three of her kids is a stress that, is unfathomable to most people. But when she would recount her, my dad, my uncle, and my aunt, she would only remember the good stuff, and she was always making jokes, and she loved to watch MASH on TV. So again, here was somebody who took maybe some bad things and tended not to focus on the bad, but focus on the good. And I think that's something for hopefully all of us to think about as we go through our day. I think while we can't alter the stress we can in our lives, negative stress, sometimes we can alter our perceptions of that stress. And at the end of the day, that may help pay off by helping us live to 100 and hopefully beyond. So hopefully, our time together this week has been worthwhile. I've had a lot of fun talking about this. It was a great conversation I had with that gentleman last week. And again, I really should thank him for giving me the idea for this. Again, what I would say is, for a lot more information on health and wellness and personal training and all that stuff and supplements, check out my websites, joe-cannon.com and supplementclarity.com. Those are the two websites where I do lots and lots of writing about health and wellness and fitness and supplements. And from there, you can also email me if you like as well. So that it will bring the end of this episode, with the exception of the quote of the week, which comes to us this week from Booker T. Washington, who said, "If you want to lift up yourself, lift up somebody else." Great words. Until next week, gang, I'm Joe Cannon. Have yourself a great day and go out and make a difference.